Hi everyone, it's Jasmine. On today's episode of the Slain Project, we're going to be talking about the case of Juanita Adams. She left her home on the Pine Ridge Reservation in 1978 to join a political walk to Washington, D.C. She never made it home, and her body was found in the state of Georgia in May 1980. And the person who did this to her has never been caught. Now, if you would like to see more videos on missing and murdered Indigenous people, click that subscribe button and the notification bell. Now let's get right into it. Juanita Adams. Juanita was 19 years old and a Lakota tribal member who lived on the Pine Ridge Reservation when she disappeared in 1978. She had two brothers and two sisters and a large extended family. She also was the mother to a 3-year-old boy at the time named Damien. Her given traditional Lakota name is Amani-Wee, which means woman on the longest walk. This name seems to have eerily fit her, seeing as what was about to happen to her. According to her cousin named Roxanne Tubles, Juanita was a part of a peaceful protest walk involving the American Indian Movement, also known as AIM. She said that sometime in 1978, Juanita came home for a few days and left again to continue with the protest with people she met on the walk. Nobody seen or heard from Juanita after she left home this final time, and no one would know what happened to her for over 30 years. The protest Juanita left to join was called the Longest Walk and was coordinated by AIM leader Dennis Banks and an outspoken Sioux activist and professor, Dr. Lyman L. Brightman, who was the president of the United Native Americans, Inc., or UNA. The purpose of the walk was to educate the public on Native American rights and way of life. There were 11 legislative bills introduced into the 95th U.S. Congress at the time that would repeal Native treaties that protect Native sovereignty, their tribal lands, water, hunting, and fishing rights were at stake. Funding for social services was also threatened. The walk started at Alcatraz Island in San Francisco on February 11, 1978, and ended in Washington, D.C. on July 15, 1978. The route they took was about 3,600 miles. Only 26 people officially walked the whole distance and described it as a spiritual journey. The walk started with about 2,000 people. Many other people joined by car, bus, and plane. When they arrived in Washington, D.C., there were about 30,000 supporters that joined the journey along the way. The walk was a success, meaning that none of the 11 proposed bills passed. Around the same time, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act was signed into law in August 1978, also known as AIRFA. Indigenous people were granted religious freedom of religion and the right to sacred ceremony under this act, a right that all other non-natives already possess in the United States. Many high-profile celebrities at the time supported this walk and joined the protesters in Washington, D.C. Muhammad Ali, Marlon Brando, and Stevie Wonder were among them. On July 25, 1978, Professor Brightman held a speech in front of the Washington Monument that focused on the importance of protecting Native rights and land. He also used this speech to speak about the forced sterilization of Native women. He stated that between 40 and 50% of Native women were sterile at the time. They were sterilized without proper consent or just after giving birth. A lot of the women could not read or write and were told just to sign the forms. They were often told that they could die if they had more children, that they had cysts on their ovaries, or that the procedure was reversible. He explained that the larger Caucasian population could handle this, but that this action on a smaller Native population could drive them to extinction. He went on to say that estimates for the previous 20 years indicate that a minimum of 300,000 Native women have been left barren. I will link his speech down below for you to listen. By the end of July 1978, almost all of the protesters made it home, everyone except for Juanita. She would never make it home from her courageous journey she took to stand up for her people. On May 22, 1980, a land surveying crew found the unidentified remains of a young woman near Gainesville, Georgia. The location was near a former rest area on Georgia 365, now known as I-985. It was pouring rain the day that the badly decomposed body was found, and about 75 to 100 feet off of the interstate. Media reports in 1980 say that investigators originally thought the body was that of a Caucasian woman. They were able to determine that she was about 5 feet 5 inches tall with short brown hair. Examination of the skeletal remains estimated the age as 17 to 19 years, but dental experts said between 20 to 30 years. No cause of death could be determined because of the severe decomposition. Also found with the remains was a patch of nylon pantyhose, a silver coral and turquoise ring found under the body, platinum surgical wire, and a light brown artificial eye that belonged to the right side. Investigators knew that the deceased had a major injury to the face before death because of the artificial eye, a chunk of skull missing from the forehead, and injury to the right side of the face. Detectives reached out to numerous eye doctors in the Southeast, but could not find the maker of the eye. Subsequent searches on reported missing persons in the region also led to nothing. Investigators had no idea that their Jane Doe was from so far away. The case was reopened in March 1997. This time, examination determined that the victim could have been African or Native American, 17 to 24 years of age, and about 5 feet 6 inches tall. Still, no cause of death could be determined. They also believed the person died between February 1977 and March 1980. 40 hours was spent reconstructing the skull in January 2007, and the scars were enhanced in hopes of catching someone's eye who knew the person in life. This was a good call because Juanita's cousin Roxanne recognized this as being her in 2010. Roxanne said that Juanita was last seen in 1978 and that she had been in a bad car accident. She received surgery at Ellsworth Air Force Base and also had an artificial eye. She was shown the ring and knew that it had belonged to Juanita. Medical and dental records were also provided by her family, but definite confirmation would need to be made by DNA testing, and a sample was taken from her sister for comparison. The results would take 6 months to be received from the University of Texas. Jane Doe, who had been unidentified for over 30 years, was positively identified as being Juanita Adams on March 11, 2011. In the press conference announcing the identification, investigators said that Juanita was last known to be in Nashville after leaving Washington, D.C. They also think that maybe she was promised a ride home from a truck driver. Juanita's family and investigators believe that she was murdered, even though no cause of death was determined. I also think this is true. The most recognizable piece of clothing was a piece of pantyhose. They could have been used to strangle her. Juanita's remains were flown back home and she was laid to rest next to her mother in Red Shirt, South Dakota. As of this recording in April 2022, no one has ever been identified as a suspect in her death. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any memories of Juanita or spent any time with her in Washington, D.C., please leave a comment down below. And I hope to see you in the next video.